Good evening and welcome to the Woodlands Community Centre. Some housekeeping before we begin. We're not expecting a fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the fire exits and meet outside at the fire assembly point. Councillors will be using tablet devices to access the agenda for this meeting. We always welcome people to speak at this meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. The members of the public, we have nobody registered to speak, but we do have one written statement which will be read out at the appropriate point on the agenda. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but we will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private, neither of which we would take lightly or wish to do so. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to the meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and the public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined any application. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. Right, moving swiftly on to item 1, apologies. Can I just check, have we received any apologies?
We haven't.
Thank you. No apologies. Item 2 is public participation, and we've not received any this time. So item 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interests as they occur to you in the meeting. Just wondering if any of the Fair Oak councillors will want to declare anything for the finance. No? Okay. Item 4 is the minutes. Can we move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of July? Can I now approve these as a true record? Could I have a proposer, please? Cllr Broomfield, and a seconder. Cllr Couldrey. All agreed? Any abstentions? Any against? And I do want to raise one matter arising from the minutes, which is that we had asked that our officers write to Bishopstoke Parish Council to inform them of the decision that we would extend their requests for time to spend the money in for the boardwalk feasibility study. So I'm just going to get that confirmed that they have done that. Can I pass over to our local area manager, Kitty Budden?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the letter was sent on the 18th of July to the Parish Council, confirming the revised deadline of the 12th of January. And at this point, the Parish Council are in discussion with Aqua Science regarding the boardwalk. Thank you.
Thank you. Have any other members got any points that they would like to raise under the minutes? No. Okay. I will now move on to my announcements. I'm going to keep this brief. There were 2 items we were anticipating having on our agenda this time. One was a suitable alternative natural green space at Stoke Park Farm. This application is not ready for members to hear yet, and there has been a lot of interest from the community which officers are looking at. It is hopeful that it will come to the next meeting, so if anybody does want to talk on that, it will be hopefully at the next meeting. The other item that we thought may have been presented was for the demolition of Bishopstoke Memorial Hall, but that wasn't ready in time or submitted in time to complete its consultation phase. So unfortunately, this committee cannot talk on the matter. I also want to make sure that if there are any residents who listen back to this, that the Bishopstoke Memorial Hall project is not a project of Eastleigh Borough Council. It is a Bishopstoke Parish Council matter and the building belongs to them, Eastleigh has no power to just knock down somebody's building. So I'm now going to go on to item 6, which is our financial management report. I'm going to ask Kitty to present it.
Thank you, Chair. So the committee report that councillors have received has a number of recommendations which are set out in the report. I won't run through all of them as they are set out in the report in some detail. There is an update to the report. Paragraph 6 of the report contains a table that sets out a number of figures and contributions that are to be allocated towards an overspend for the Stoke Park Woods footpath improvements. The information that was provided by the council's finance team unfortunately had a couple of decimal places in the wrong place. So the table on the screen now has been updated. Those are the correct figures, and there's a revised recommendation requesting councillors approve the allocation of £999.60 towards the Stoke Park Farm footpath improvements project overspend. The other thing I'd like to mention is in paragraph 10 of the report, in relation to the Bow Lake Gardens bench, we've been able to identify a suitably sized bench in the recycled plastic that will fit the space available with a lead time of about 6 weeks. So hopefully that will be on order shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions of Councillor Broomfield?
It's actually more of a comment than a question. I'd just like to say thank you for sorting out the bill at the Knoll Lane bus stop at last. It's been quite a long old thing. And I'm just thinking how much nicer the world would have been and how much more fun we would all have if you just headed this bin for a structure.
Councillor Tidridge.
Linking into the infrastructure idea, I'm just wondering, we always have additional bins, and I know that Bishopstoke Parish Council has been trying to survey how many bins it actually has and where they all are. I'm wondering whether or not it would be worth doing something with Bishopstoke and also possibly with Thurrock Parish Council, just to review where all the bins are. We keep on adding bins, we rarely take them away, and bins cost money. I'm thinking in particular of, I'm not sure whether both of them are parish or not, but the play area close to me, there is a bin inside the play area. There's also a brand new bin just outside the play area, yards away from each other. And obviously that's going to be double the energy to keep those emptied and maintained. I'm just thinking whether or not it would be possible to do a infrastructure survey to just look at what we've got where and just do a little bit of sense checking, because all the time I've been a councillor, I'm not aware of a bin ever being taken away.
Thank you, Councillor Tidridge. I am aware that the local engagement officers used to have at least a map of the bins that were Eastleigh boroughs, and clearly street scene empty the bins, so surely they must know where they collect them from. Do you want to come? Can I ask Kitty to come back on this? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually in the process of arranging for a member of staff to do a survey of bins and benches across the entirety of the borough. So that piece of work is being planned.
Would that include bins and benches put in by other local authorities, e.g. the parish councils? Yeah. Fantastic. Is it possible to make the clerk at Bishopstoke aware of this? Because I'm not entirely sure that he is. Thank you.
On that point, I think it would be wise to bring Thurrock in as well, because, for example, in Summerlands Road, there's been an Eastleigh Borough Council bin by the shops, and now there's also a nice blue Parish Council bin about 10 yards away, which seems rather overdoing it, when there are other places that probably could do with bins. Because one of the issues, coming back to your point, I used to contact Alison Densham and she'd put a bin in. Obviously that's changed, it does seem, when we want a new bin, how do we go about it? Because it seems to take quite a long time, because that bin in Knoll Lane was quite a long old process. Very often, bins are requested by residents because there is a problem, not because they think there might be a problem sometime in 6 months or a year's time. So I think it would be helpful to have, if possible, a swifter response. Even if it's no, that would be something, rather than someone just saying, no, we're looking into it, and then 6 months later they're still looking into it. It's just one of those things that really upsets people, is having litter and no bin. Thank you.
I don't disagree. I think we still have to, as councillors, unfortunately, use case management. And we haven't really been informed yet as to where some of these things now sit or where they go. The other thing is that we should also be cognizant that when people ask for bins, though, that sometimes the residents nearby don't want a bin. And I think that often gets missed out. So where one person thinks that's a fantastic idea, the local residents have on occasions turned around and said, no, we don't want one put there. So I think there's probably more work to do about that, but that's sort of digressing away from the finance report. So if I can bring us back to the report, is there any other questions on the finances? Councillor Tidridge.
Looking at the item on the cafe, I think all you've got to do is look at any kind of infrastructure project, and it's difficult to get the pricing right. I know we're in an environment where construction costs have massively increased over the last few years. I think the idea of a community cafe in Fair Oak is admirable, and it's certainly something that I'm very glad this committee is supporting. But at the same time, this seems to be a constant ask that we keep on coming up with. We keep on being asked for more money. And I don't want to criticise the project, because they're always very clear that they are also getting additional funding from additional places, which is admirable. And we want it. It's just that it seems to be going on and on with increasing number of requests. Is there any chance we can get an idea from the cafe as to whether or not this is going to be the last one?
Thank you. I think that's eminently sensible, and I think we said at our last meeting, actually, that a significant amount of money has gone on this building, and then to have this actually very, very shortly afterwards. I think we could ask our officer to write to Fair Oak to get some clarity. Is that all right? That doesn't need to be a recommendation. That can just be minuted, can't it? Thank you. Okay, any other points? Councillor Tidridge.
So it seems to be on me tonight, doesn't it? I just want to state in this committee how disappointed I am that we still don't see any sign of the allotments at Cllr Drive, the allotments of Boat Lake Gardens, the new cemetery extension transferring from the developer to Eastleigh Borough Council to the Parish Council. These are sites which should be of use to the residents of Bishopstoke, and they, at the moment, are 3 effectively derelict, unused sites which are actually causing problems from an antisocial behaviour perspective, not the community assets that they should be. So I just want to express my disappointment, but you've heard me say that many times before.
Was there a question that, because we're not in debate yet?
My question is, it would be really, I would really like to see these added to the finance report on an ongoing basis. How's that?
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will need a proposal in a second just so we can enter into debate, if that's all right. So could I have a proposer? Councillor Tidridge, and a second, Cllr Broomfield. Okay, any debate? All right, I was going to raise that it was wonderful to see that some assets are being transferred. I'm just hugely disappointed that none of those assets are the ones from Bishopstoke, which have been going on forever and actually are really letting our residents down. Okay then, so as we've now moved it and there is no further debate, all those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We'll move on to item 7, the presentation on planning guidelines. I'm now going to ask Gary to present the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick reminder to members on what issues you need to take into account for this evening's planning item. Proposals must be considered on planning grounds and must be considered in accordance with the development plan, which is the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 2036. Relevant considerations are obviously the plan, any adopted supplementary planning documents relating to matters such as courtesy places, residential parking standards, any government policy set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, which was updated this year, and the NPPF, or the framework, is a significant material consideration and takes precedent over the development plan where necessary. In terms of the amended or the updated NPPF, it requires development to be delivered sustainably, without delay, meet housing need, promote growth of economy, high standards of design, and ensure that any impact is either prevented or mitigated. So that presumes or has a presumption in favour of sustainable development, which has 3 threads: economic, social and environmental. All are interdependent and must be pursued together in mutually supportive ways. Material considerations then are planning history or previous applications or decisions related to the site, any relevant appeal decisions or site-specific policies or site-specific matters, consulting on third-party comments where planning related, any precedent, case law, and 5-year housing supply, although that's not relevant to this evening's item. Any non-planning related issues are moral, racial or religious views, devaluation or otherwise of property, loss of any private view or breach of covenants, or matters covered by other legislation such as building regulations, alcohol licensing, etc. Any personal views about the character of an applicant or their reasons for an application, or any civil matters such as boundary disputes. Just a note on conditions. The LPA or local planning authority is required to consider whether an otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the application of a condition that can then be discharged at a later date if necessary, or simply says X must happen, Y must happen, etc. Any conditions that are applied must meet the 6 tests of planning, so they must be necessary, relevant to planning and relevant to development, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other respects. Right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to take a moment to inform members that I have received Councillor Marsh's apologies, so please can we record them. Do any members have any questions on the planning guidelines, which we've just heard, before we move into the planning application at item 8? Okay, so we're now going to move on to item 8, the planning application for 32 Bradshaw Close, Fair Oak, Eastleigh, SA50 7BS, which is planning application H2394919, and I'm going to ask Dorothy to present the report. I know we have a statement, but I believe this will be read out after you've given your presentation. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Agenda 8 is a householder planning application for 32 Bradshaw Close, and this application seeks retrospective approval for retention of a boundary fence fronting the Mortimer's Lane and the raised patio at the rear of the property. The application was initially brought before this committee in July, but was deferred due to the need for additional information and clarifications. And so tonight, I will not go into the full details of the proposal again. I will focus on the updates and address the inquiries and concerns raised from our last meeting. And specifically, the members request the precise dimensions for each corner of the proposed raised patio, as well as the information regarding the dimensions of the previous patio and the proposed changes to the shared boundary height. Additionally, during our previous discussions, there was a suggestion to consider reducing the size of the raised patio to introduce a staircase leading directly from the single-story side extension door. So So I have conducted a comprehensive on-site measurements since last meeting. It has been confirmed that the ground level of the application site is uneven. The site features a gentle incline from north to south and from east to west. Therefore, the raised patio displays varying elevations above the ground level at different corners. So the precise measurements are, at the top left corner, the depth of the raised patio above the ground level is 9 centimeters, and moving to the bottom left corner is 33 centimeters, and at the top right corner, the depth is 43 centimeters. Finally, the depth of the bottom right corner is 86 centimeters above the ground level. And in terms of the size, the raised patio spans the entire width of the application site, measuring around 13.3 meters. And the length along the southern boundary is around 5 meters. And the length along the northern boundary is around 8.6 meters. Move to update 3, it is about the pre-existing patio. According to the online site photograph, the application site had a pre-existing raised patio. It occupied about half of the site width, and the depth was approximately equivalent to the height of the concrete kickbox of the fence. And currently, the southern boundary treatment consists of a 1.8 panels with concrete kickbox at the bottom. And however, the distance from the top of the patio to above the, like when viewed from the application site, when you stand on the patio, the height above the patio from the patio to the top of the fence is 1.5 meters. When viewed from the neighbor side, the fence height measured from the ground level to the top is currently 2 meters. One of the key considerations related to raised patio is the potential issues of overlooking, particularly from the southern boundary. So to address this concern, a proposed solution involves replacing the first 3 panels that run along the patio. It suggests to elevate the 3 panels to a height of 1.8 meters, and this increase in height of the 3 panels is not form part of the planning application. It is used to overcome the planning concern of overlooking and proposed to be secured through planning condition. And from 1.8 meters to 1.5 meters to 1.8 meters, which is adding 30 centimeters in height. And when this proposed elevation is implemented, the fence height will be increased to 2.3 meters when observed from the neighbor side. So in the neighbor's objection, he stated that the raised height of the fence could result in unacceptable adverse impact, especially since the fence is close to the glazed kitchen back door and the breakfast area. He also claimed that the increased fence height cannot address their concern about overlooking and loss of privacy from the raised patio. But we believe that 1.8 meters is a reasonable height, and this elevation can reduce the chance of unintentional observation and provide a greater sense of privacy for the neighbors and addressing their valid concern about privacy. And it is also important to highlight that the additional 30 centimeters is roughly equivalent to the size of a normal A4 paper. So this relatively minor increase in height is not considered to cause any harmful impact to the neighbors, and it will not result in dramatic difference when compared to the existing fence. And as what I have mentioned in the last meeting in July, while the fence will be observed as 2.3 meters from the neighbor side, but given that the fence is located to the northern side of the neighbor's property, this positioning can mitigate any concern about loss of light or overshadowing, and the impact on their amenities in terms of light or shadow will be minimal. And as you may recall, there were suggestions to alter the patio size and the location of steps to address certain concerns, and I did convey the suggestions to the applicant after the previous committee meeting, but regretfully, the applicant is not willing to undertake those modifications and has chosen to maintain the original proposal. Therefore, there are no further changes to the application since the last committee, and the previous recommendation and condition remain unchanged. So our recommendation also remain unchanged as permit subject to the conditions set out in the agenda. And thank you very much for listening. I have nothing further to add unless there are any questions.
Before we go to questions, we go to speakers. So I'm now going to ask our local area manager to read out a statement she has received.
Thank you, Chair. This is a statement from Mr. Ian Galley for the 27th of September 2023 in relation to this application. As immediate neighbours, we object to this submission for a patio of height, extent and proximity that is causing us significant loss of privacy due to overlooking. The case officer has recently reconfirmed that the height of the patio makes it a general permitted development order raised platform and is not permitted work. The current debate is about raising the shared boundary fence immediately outside our back door to 2.3 metres high to mitigate the overlooking from the patio. The general permitted development order includes numerous elements of not permitted works. We suggest they are works where there is a high likelihood of causing unacceptable adverse impacts on neighbours. We suggest that the primary test for not permitted works is how close they are to neighbours. If they are at distance, then the adverse impact may well be considered immaterial. If they are very close, then the full adverse impact will remain and the works would remain not permitted. For fences above 2 metres, we cannot imagine a more certain circumstance than ours for the adverse impacts to fully materialise. The fence panels are directly outside and just 2 metres beside our glazed kitchen back door with our breakfast area immediately inside. The proposed 2.3 metre height is 15% higher than the 2 metre trigger height and 28% higher than the normal fence height of 1.8 metres. We suggest that if a fence of 2.3 metres high, so close to a neighbour's habitable space, was expected to be acceptable under general permitted development order, then the trigger level for not permitted would be 2.3 metres and not 2 metres. We also wish to take this opportunity to raise an additional issue in that the current proposal does not address our overlooking loss of privacy from persons using the French doors of the recent new side extension. In summary, we believe the raising of the fence panels so close to our habitable space and by so much above 2 metres does not comply with the general permitted development order, and we invite the committee to agree with us and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to now open it up for councillors for questions.
Can we come back on comments first?
We don't usually come back on comments, do we?
If we have a speaker, then you are welcome to invite the planners to respond to comments made by the speaker.
Okay. Or members can pick up on the comments made and ask questions.
Yeah.
Well, I think the response. Can I jump in or not? I think it will just be useful to pick up on what Mr. Galley's comments in his relation to the general permitted development order and permitted development. His interpretation of the legislation is not quite correct. Permitted development is not, it sets limits as to what does and does not require planning approval, not what is or isn't acceptable. Simply because something is greater than that allowed under permitted development does not make it unacceptable. So that there is a difference in what he is saying there. So that will be part of your deliberations this evening, is to whether the recommended condition to raise that boundary fence in order to preserve Mr. Galley's privacy would be an acceptable way of addressing his concerns, or whether you think there's an alternative solution to the problem, or indeed an alternative recommendation for the application itself, should you choose to go against officers' recommendations.
So I'm going to now open up for councillors for questions. So if councillors have any questions of officers. Councillor Tidridge.
And Thank you. A question for the planning team. What would happen if we reject this tonight?
That's obviously within your remit. You can choose to refuse the application if you wish.
What's the implications of if we did reject?
As long as you put forward valid planning grounds to refuse the scheme, and we can certainly advise as to what they may be. If you highlight to us what the concerns are, then yes, you are within your rights to refuse the scheme if you wish.
I'm not asking about our rights to refuse. I'm asking what is the implication if we do refuse and what will happen to the site? Do you see what I mean? It's a different question.
Yes, that's another matter. It would be then back with our enforcement team to consider whether it's in the public interest to take enforcement action. If it's not refused, then I imagine the situation would stay as it is at current.
Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. Just a question based on, I suppose, item 4 in your report, which is based on the analysis of online site photographs. It was observed that the application site had a pre-existing raised patio. The previous patio occupied only half of the site's width and featured a depth that was approximately equivalent to the height of the concrete kickboard. Do we have any sort of illustration of where this patio actually extended to? Because as we look at that picture, I'm assuming it came from the left-hand side, i.e. the Mortimer's Lane end of the garden, and came across to, what, halfway under that middle window next to the patio doors, somewhere like that?
Yes, according to the photograph, it just extends from the southern boundary up to the half of the site. Yes, and from the northern boundary to the middle is just a slope.
So it came from number 31's boundary
Yes, this is
to
the raised
left,
patio,
okay.
and
And
this is
it
the
was the
slope.
height of the concrete kickboards, which is, what is it, 5 centimetres or something? That's... Yeah,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Equivalent to the height of.
That is quite a chunky bit of construction that's gone on there to increase that quite small, fairly innocuous patio into something you could probably land a helicopter on. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members? Okay, so that we can enter into debate, can I have a proposer and a seconder? And just because you propose something or second it does not mean that you have to approve this application. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Broomfield and seconded by Councillor Caws. Is there any debate, members? Councillor Tidridge.
I think that I feel really disappointed that the applicant hasn't chosen to at least consider mitigating and adjusting what is effectively a considerable raising of the soil level, of the ground level, without planning permission. This is retrospective, isn't it? I think it was Councillor Couldrey who came up with an eminently sensible possibility that the resident could consider that would be a really nice gesture towards their neighbours that's just not been considered, or has been considered and rejected. I think that's really quite sad. And I feel really concerned that what this project demonstrates is a significant raising of the ground level. That's a big deal. And I think I cannot see how this links to the MPPF principles. It's not increasing housing. It's not providing more housing. It's not got a positive environmental impact. Arguably, possibly a positive social impact. It's really difficult to see the merits of this application in that light. I cannot see how it fits with MPPF. And I don't know if the officers can help to demonstrate to me how it does, because I can't see that at the moment.
Would you like that answered as a question? I know we're in debate, but...
I know I know I'm really confusing the questions with the debates, but yes, please.
I'll ask our officers to respond. Can you respond, please?
It's essentially set out in Dorothy's report. The MPPF is a very big document which obviously covers everything. This is at the very, very bottom scale, which it was never really intended to cover. So we're essentially, in this instance, we're looking at issues of amenity and design, effectively. That's what we're looking at in this instance. Yes, I agree. It's got nothing to do with housing or anything. It's not relevant. But not all development is related to housing. So the main issues I would ask or suggest members consider are issues of design, issues of amenity, and concentrate on those elements of the scheme as to whether you think it's acceptable or it's not, and if not, so whether there are grounds to look at rejecting the scheme, but I would suggest on either design grounds or amenity grounds.
Is there any other debate? Councillor Broomfield.
So, entering into the realms of the hypothetical, if the applicant hadn't built this patio, but actually came to you as a planning officer with a plan that put that patio that close to the neighbour's fence at that height, would you be recommending it to be accepted, or would you not be recommending it be accepted? That's a straightforward question, and I think it's quite, well, yeah, I'd like to, would you or wouldn't you? Straight answer, I suppose.
Very sorry, absolutely.
That's a tricky one. Yes, it's retrospective, but legislation specifically says you can't be penalised for a retrospective application. You must consider it in the same way as if it were a proposal as opposed to something that's already been constructed. Were it to come to me as the case officer, I wouldn't be very keen on it, I'll admit that. I would probably look to get amendments, get it reduced, depth reduced, pulled in from the side, suggesting possibly of moving the steps and so on, which is all very easy to do when you're just looking at paper. But if push came to shove, and they said, no, this is what we want to build, I think, in my view, it would be difficult to refuse. It's not great, but is it bad enough to refuse? That would be the question I'd ask myself.
Councillor Tidridge.
Sorry, it's another question. You've made it very clear that we shouldn't be penalising a retrospective planning application, but surely the opposite is also true. We shouldn't be automatically passing something which is retrospective. We shouldn't be treated any differently to if that had been part of the original planning permission. That's correct, yes? Thank you.
While we're on the subject of questions, I'm going to quickly ask my question, which is, did we ever find out if there was a sewer that does run underneath it? Because that was something that had been raised. It was a consultation response that said that they thought there was a public sewer that ran. It is definitely in the document, isn't it? Or am I imagining that I read that?
It's point 17 in the consultation responses.
If the site was in proximity to a public sewer, and a public sewer is any sewer now, so it could be the small one serving individual properties, not a main one running down the middle of the street. They were probably consulted as a automatic requirement, and looking at that response, that's their generic response, essentially. And it could well be that it's actually a sewer running down Mortimer's Lane as opposed to running across the back of the site under the patio. Even if there is one under there, that doesn't mean you can't build over it. but you would need separate consent from Southern Water in order to do it. So that's a separate issue to planning.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Caws, did you have your hand up for debate? Sorry, I wasn't quite sure.
Question again. With the height of the fence being 2.3 metres, I know that is higher than recommended. Does that come with any dangers? I know we've had a lot of high winds recently, and are there any kind of affiliated dangers with that?
I would suggest no worse than the chance of any other fence coming over. As long as it looks like good solid concrete posts there, so you could fit. We're only talking 30 centimetres, so we're talking that effectively extra on top of the existing fence, that height. So that's not going to have, it's not going to suddenly be a massive sail that will start blowing away or anything like that. And it's sheltered in, tucked in with the house and everything anyway, so I wouldn't have thought, it's certainly not an issue from the planning side of things.
Thank you.
Is there any other debate? Councillor Caws.
Yeah, I, as Councillor Tidridge, I am disappointed at this because I remember when we spoke about this before, it was a people problem really, and we kind of hoped and we requested that there would be a conversation between the neighbours and that they would come to some agreement, and it just seems that hasn't happened. So that is the sad thing, and the sad is, and even sadder, the people that live there and the two neighbours are now going to be living in, you know, not peaceful environment between them, and that is a real shame. And I think, you know, the fact that the applicant hasn't even considered compromise is unhelpful.
Is there any other debate? Councillor Couldrey.
Thank you. The proposal has made some concession to overlooking by adding this 30 centimetre band. I think I can quite understand why the other people object, because it does make it disproportionately high. It's not huge, but it is disproportionately high. It'll change their environment. On the other hand, it is the northern wall and it's not going to take any light away. I understand that. So my question comes to me, would I approve this as a paper application before? And I think that's the right question. And I don't think that I would. Because I do think it is too intrusive for the neighbour and to force them to have this higher boundary, etc. And so I'm afraid that I think I've got what source, you know, that's the way I'm thinking about it, and that's the way I think I'll go.
Thank you, Councillor Couldrey. You stole the words right out of my mouth, because the point I was going to make is, if I was looking at this as a fresh application, as a brand new application, because that's what we should be doing, we should not be considering the fact that it's there, although we can physically see it. Would we have passed this? And I feel that it's very intrusive on the neighbours, and I don't think I would have, if I had not seen it, been able to approve it. So at the moment, I am minded not to. If I am not alone, and Councillor Couldrey is not alone in feeling this, I will ask for a few more minutes so that we can have a wider conversation with our officers. What do other members feel? Is anybody else feeling that they are going to be supportive? I think is perhaps the thing that we need to understand in this debate.
Yes, I think Councillor Couldrey, you make a really, really good point, which is we aren't penalising this, and we shouldn't be, and we should be treating this as if it was a fresh paper application. I'm just struggling to see which policies this actually fits with to be able to say yes to it in its proposed format. It's not a positive as far as the environment goes. We're talking about creating a big non-porous surface. We're talking about an area which has a negative impact, arguably, from a biodiversity perspective. And that's even before you get to the point of it's not great from the neighbour's perspective. And I don't think it's difficult to say how you would treat something if you were presented with something completely different to what you can see in front of you. But I don't think I would be minded to pass it, because I'm just struggling to see what policies it actually complies with.
Thank you, Councillor Tidridge. So if we go to the vote, and then if the vote fails, I'm going to call a halt. I hope members are... Oh, sorry, Councillor Broomfield, do you want to come back?
Thank you. I was just going to say, having visited Mr. Galley and his partner several times, I think a 2.3 metre high fence at that point would be quite overbearing. It's very close to their conservatory. The window you can see at the bottom of the green arrow is their kitchen window. So effectively, it blocks out an awful lot of light. Where they are at the moment, they can see the trees on the other side of Mortimer's Lane. I think if my neighbours stuck up a 2.3 metre high fence that close to my kitchen window, I would be extremely upset. And I just think, I'm sorry, but it's not acceptable. I would not vote for this if it came as a planning application. And I think from the way we've been talking, I'm not entirely sure that officers would be overly happy about recommending it. It's not about punishing the applicant for doing what they did. It's about common equity, that Mr. Galley and his partner shouldn't be hemmed into their kitchen, patio, back garden, where, as you can see, they're keen gardeners, by a fence that's 2.3 metres high, which is half a metre, which I'm trying to struggle to put into imperial, but I can't do it, but it's pretty big. Even I know 2.3 metres is high. I'm 1.72 apparently. It's wrong, and we shouldn't be. I just cannot bring myself to vote for that sort of overbearing fence, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much. On that matter then, I'm now going to go to the vote, so that if we need to, we can pause the meeting. So, firstly, any member in favour? Any member against? That's unanimous. So I'm now going to pause the meeting and ask them to stop recording while I seek some officer guidance. And if anybody wants to stretch their legs for 5 minutes, please do so. Okay, if I can now bring members back. So I just wish to clarify before we go to the new vote, that members have concerns on the following. One, the height of the shared boundary fence and its impact upon the visual amenity and outlook of the neighbours. And secondly, members have concerns relating to the excessive height and scale of the patio. And I just want to confirm that there were no concerns raised on the Mortimer's Lane fencing on the north side, because that does form part of this application, so it has to be all considered, but we don't have concerns on that. Thank you, members. Okay, so we now have a new recommendation, which is that the committee refuses on the grounds outlined, and we delegate back to the Service Director for Planning and Environment in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair to agree the final wording. This is our new recommendation. Can I please have a proposer? Oh, everybody went up. Councillor Tidridge and seconder Councillor Broomfield. I don't need anything else, do I? Right. With that in mind, now can I take it to the vote? All those in favour of the new recommendation, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, officers, for your time and your presentation and bearing with us. Please feel free to leave. You do not need to stay. Thank you. There's planning appeals.
That'll take all the 30 seconds.
Okay. So, right, moving swiftly on to the planning appeals at item 9. Councillors, next we have planning appeals. Can I ask that we note the appeals? Is that a yes or a yes? Members are all in agreement. I actually want to say something on this, and I know we don't usually on appeals, but I think we'll all be pleased to see that our decision that we took as a committee for the 8 houses was also upheld by the planning inspector. Because I know, and I think we all had a very long. There was lots of concerns about the environment, safety for pedestrians, the breaching our own policies. So I think it was a good outcome. Councillor Tidridge.
I was really pleased, equally, that the repeal was rejected. I was a little bit disappointed, however, that there still doesn't seem to be an understanding of the overheating and noise-related issue. I know it's a complicated one, and it's comparatively new as something that's come through, but I was a little bit disappointed that the interpretation of that in the appeal didn't seem to quite reflect what we'd said, but the right outcome.
Absolutely, and let's hope that the new local plan, when it's updated, policies will be fit for that element. Okay, so if there's no further debate on that, this concludes the meeting. It just leaves me to say I would like to thank everybody, and that the next meeting is due to be held here on Wednesday the 29th of November at 6:30 at the Woodlands Centre. Thank you all and good evening.